Hello and welcome to this webinar. Today we're launching the World Public Sector Report 2025. The World Public Sector Report is a recurring biennial publication from the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or UNDESA. The World Public Sector Report 2025 examines the role that supreme audit institutions, or SAIs, play in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. The work of SAIs in general may not be well known by the public. However, many people will be familiar with the name of their country's SAI, be it a court of audit, the Court of Accounts, the National Audit Office, or the Office of the Auditor General. SAIs perform a central function within government accountability systems. Their mandates are generally aimed at promoting the transparency, efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability of the public sector and improving the financial management and performance of government institutions. Through their audits, SAIs produce critical information to the effectiveness of public policies and programs, insights that may otherwise be unavailable to governments. Through this, many SAIs produce information that is directly relevant to SDG implementation, even though they may not frame their work in these terms. Many audits have tangible impacts, leading governments to adjust their institutional mechanisms. SAIs have also gradually increased their contribution to national SDG follow-up and review. It's against this backdrop the report provides a global picture of SAI's contribution to SDG implementation, follow-up and review, both in the aggregate and in specific SDG areas, government preparedness to implement the SDGs, budgets and public financial management, inclusion, and climate change. The report synthesizes audit findings and recommendations in various SDG areas and presents examples of audit impacts in terms of improving and advancing the SDGs, with a special focus on least developed countries and small island developing states. The report also analyzes the impact of the prioritization of SDG audits on SAI strategies, audit plans, and methods of work, identifies emerging trends, innovative approaches, and challenges in this regard, and it reflects on how SAI's contribution may have influenced SDG implementation. Today, we want to give you a flavor of the main messages of the report and its content. Then we'll hear comments and reactions from 3 experts on our panel today. We will have some time to address questions from participants towards the end, and you can post your questions in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that. So let's get going. Our first speaker will be Mr. Naveed Hanif, ASG for Economic Development of UNDESA. Mr. Hanif, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. And I also want to welcome the panelists and our colleague, David. And of course, those who are participating in the launch, greetings from New York to everyone. It is a pleasure to share a few key messages from the World Public Sector Report 2025. The report asks a simple question. What role have supreme audit institutions played in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals since 2015? And the answer is clear. SAIs matter. And they matter more than we often acknowledge. Since 2016, SAIs across all regions, developed and developing alike, have carried out hundreds of SDG-related audits. Today, their work spans all 17 goals. This is not marginal activity. This is system-level accountability in action. At the national level, SAIs have put hard evidence on the table. Evidence that strengthens accountability, evidence that turns SDG commitments into action. Their audits have shaped laws, policies, and institutions. They have exposed gaps between ambition and delivery. They have flagged inefficiencies in public spending, and they have made risks visible, often for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world of shrinking fiscal space, this kind of evidence is not optional, it is indispensable. SAIs have also strengthened SDG data and monitoring. In many countries, they have reinforced national follow up and review systems. Some have even contributed directly to voluntary national reviews. And the result is stronger oversight, more informed parliaments, greater accountability for SDG commitments. The report shows real impact. SAIs have informed whole of government SDG strategies. They have shed light on budgets, climate action, and inclusion. They have helped governments fix gaps, reallocate resources, and improve coordination. At the regional and global levels, SAIs have gone even further. Through coordinated audits, they have produced collective insights on issues like climate change and protected areas. Insights no single country could generate alone. And through INTERSAI, those insights have reached the global stage, from high-level political forum to the climate COPs. And I must emphasize, this did not happen by chance. One of the most compelling stories in the report is how INTERSAI chose early on to take the SDGs seriously. And that meant long-term strategies, clear guidance, peer learning, capacity building. As a result, SIs today's audit not just spending, but whether governments are actually organized to deliver on the SDGs. But the report is also honest about a persistent gap. Too much audit evidence remains underused. Findings do not always feed into policy design, financing decisions, and international follow-up. With only 5 years left, that is a missed opportunity we cannot afford. And let me close with three messages. First, to national policymakers, treat your SAIs as a strategic asset. Use audit findings to improve policy design, implementation, and budgets. Bring SAIs to SDG review and voluntary national reviews. And above all, protect their independence and resources. Accountability is not a cost, it is an investment. Second, to UN staff, especially those working at country level, start with the audits. When policies underperform, SAIs often already know why. Performance audits show where implementation breaks down, where coordination fails, and where incentives misfire. This is ready-made, country-specific evidence. We should use it. Third, and this matters especially now, audit evidence is most valuable in moments of reform and crisis, fiscal pressure, climate shocks, institutional change. That is when tough choices must be made and when independent evidence matters most. Ladies and gentlemen, DESA stands ready to continue this journey with INTERSAI on SDG audits and beyond. As we accelerate SDG implementation, the insights from supreme audit institutions must be fully mobilized, especially by governments. Time is short, the evidence is already on the table, and the clock is ticking. We should immediately get to action. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope this report will be used widely to accelerate the SDG implementation. Back to you, Lise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanif, for these important and timely messages and a big challenge and task for all of us to implement and really view SAIs as a strategic asset. Now, I'd like to turn to the coordinator of the report, Mr. David LeBlanc from the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government. David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks to all our panelists and participants for joining us today. The first thing I want to say about this report is that it was meant to be really a tribute to the amazing work that SAIs have done on SDGs since 2016. And I really hope that the report does justice to this work. This journey of SAIs working on the SDGs started already 10 years ago. So time really flies. So 2 years ago, when we started thinking about the report, we thought it was really important to document this story for a UN audience. Not the least because, as Lisa said at the beginning, the work of SAIs is not always well known outside the audit community. So this report really, one of the big objectives is to raise the awareness of UN staff, think tanks, international organizations, and other stakeholders about the wealth of original information that SAIs produce. The core of the report and where most of the evidence can be found is made of 4 thematic chapters, which covers audits of SDG preparedness, audits of budgets and public financial management, audits related to climate, and audit that touch upon different dimensions of leaving no one behind. So those chapters recount how public audits in those fields have evolved over the past 10 years, and they also synthesize common findings, conclusions, and recommendations that SAIs have made in those policy areas. And each of the chapters is based on the analysis of a large number of audit reports. So there is really very granular information that one can find there. And from that, you can see that SAIs not only cover a wide range of topics, but they do so at a level of depth that is very difficult to match. So this is really an irreplaceable source of information which we should all be aware of and utilize. Beyond the policymakers, UN staff, etc., I hope that the report will also be useful to SAIs themselves. And in particular, I think the synthesis that you can find in the thematic chapters could help perhaps SAIs in different respects, from choosing topics to audit, to designing their audits, or finding peer SAIs with which they can consult for advice and compare notes. For those who are concerned with policy evaluation and policy design, the methodology that SAIs have developed to audit the SDGs since 2016 are very, very relevant. And let me mention just 2 examples from the report. The first is the development of approaches by SAIs to assess the performance of governments in achieving a development target. So this implies some changes compared to the traditional ways of doing audits. Implies going beyond individual entities and programs. It requires a whole of government approach, and it requires attention to the coherence of policies across sector. It also reinforces the importance of stakeholder engagement to frame problems and collect perspectives, evidence, and data. And in turn, higher awareness of sectoral interlinkages encourage the inclusion in audits. For example, when you look at the climate resilience of infrastructure, the gender impacts of sectoral policies, etc. So in the report, you will find many examples of how SAIs have applied this type of approach. A second example is a methodology to assess national climate action called Climate Scanner, which was developed by a group of SAIs led by the SAI of Brazil. And this is a universal tool in the sense that it can be applied in all countries, every countries. So it enables comparable work by SAIs in different countries and also aggregation of the results. And this addresses one of the key barriers to global policy analysis, which is the lack of comparable data. And in the case of Climate Scanner, the methodology also provides SAIs with an information basis on which they can build focus climate audits. So the report highlights other trends that are very relevant for SDG work. One is the realization of the value of combining insights from multiple audits of different types to look at an issue, for example, budget issues. Another is the expansion of forward-looking work in SAIs, for instance, to assess the likelihood of achieving national climate commitments and the benefits, the costs, and the risks of business as usual trajectories. And yet another trend is the development of the capacities in SAIs to conduct performance audits. All these innovations apply beyond the SDGs. They will, of course, directly apply to the successor framework to the SDGs after 2030. But first and foremost, they are relevant for assessing progress against national development targets, which is likely to remain a key remit of many SAIs. Other speakers will talk about the challenges that SAIs still face in terms of their capacity to conduct SDG-related work. I would like to end my intervention with a remark on the delicate balance that SAIs have to strive for in the national context. The work of SAIs is conditioned, among other things, by their mandate, by the national political and policy context, and by the support that they can receive at the strategic, normative, technical, and financial levels. And the combination of these factors is a strong determinant of what topics SAIs choose to address and of the priority that they may give to the SDGs. So globally, this results in a wide range of positions of SAIs vis-à-vis the SDGs, something that's illustrated in the first chapter of the report. And this is something that we who work outside the audit community have to keep in mind. Not no two SAIs have, face exactly similar national circumstances, and this impacts their positions and what they can do vis-à-vis working on the SDGs. And in my opinion, this is really where the support provided to SAIs by INTOSAI and its grouping has been critical in moving SDG work forward. To conclude, the report has benefited enormously from contributions from INTOSAI, from IDI, from individual SAIs, and the team is deeply grateful for those inputs. This, in my opinion, has been yet another example of the close and fruitful collaboration between INTOSAI and UNDESA. I look forward to hearing our experts and their feedback on the report, and I thank you.
Thank you, David, for that overview of a very, very rich report. Now we'll hear feedback and comments on the report from our distinguished experts. I just want to kindly ask our discussants to be mindful of the time. Keep your interventions to about 7 minutes. So our first expert is Ms. Silke Steiner, Director of the General Secretariat of INTOSAI. The General Secretariat of INTOSAI, hosted by the SAI of Austria, has steered the engagement of the SAI community with the SDGs. Ms. Steiner has been involved in this work since the very beginning, and as such, she's been in a privileged position to see how the engagement of SAIs with the SDGs has evolved over the years. Ms. Steiner, please. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morrison. So, dear Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Hanif, dear Mr. David Leblanc, dear fellow panelists and dear colleagues, First of all, I would like to thank you, UNDESA, very much for the invitation to participate in the launch of this year's World Public Sector Report, which is, as we know, dedicated to the contribution that supreme audit institutions can make to the implementation of the SDGs. And on behalf of the whole INTERSAI community, I would like to express our really sincere appreciation to the United Nations, to UNDESA, for the excellent and long-standing partnership with INTERSAI and its member SAIs in this regard. And we are really particularly grateful and honored that the World Public Sector Report 2025 is dedicated to the SDG-related work of SAIs. This dedication is a strong recognition of the unique role, as we heard already, that SAIs play by holding the national governments to account when it comes to measuring their progress on the implementation, follow-up, and review of the SDGs. And the report highlights how independent audits can support national governments, the UN, and other stakeholders in accelerating process towards the SDGs, especially in this critical only a few years remaining until 2030. And the report has identified a number of important trends. Some of them we have already heard, but I would like to highlight a few more now, also from the perspective of SAIs in particular. So first of all, the mainstreaming of the SDGs into audit work. The report illustrates that there was a progressive incorporation of SDG aspects into the work of SAIs since 2016, because auditing internationally agreed development goals was, with a few exceptions, very new to SAIs when the 2030 agenda was adopted. Then the expansion of scope and coverage. Also, the range of SDGs that have been covered by the audits of SAIs has continuously increased over the time. The focus of SDG audits has also changed from SAIs first mainly auditing the so-called preparedness of governments to implement the SDGs to auditing measures that implement concrete SDGs and targets. Furthermore, there's also an increased use of cross-cutting and whole-of-government approaches. SAIs have increasingly assessed cross-cutting processes, institutional arrangement and coordination mechanisms that are relevant to the SDG implementation. And working on the SDGs has underlined the integrated and interlinked nature of sustainable development policies for SAIs. There is also an increased engagement of SAIs with stakeholders, like, for example, civil society in the context of SDG audit compared to before. Then we have also seen that there is a substantial contribution of SAIs to the SDG follow-up and review. So in many countries, the work of the SAIs supports the national follow-up and review system, sometimes even explicitly. However, there's still room for improvement because only a few SAIs participate really in the voluntary national review process. Another additional dimension that was rather new for SAIs is the very important leave no one behind focus. And for many SAIs, just working on the SDGs has brought to the fore dimensions of the 2030 agenda, like leaving no one behind, because this has not been the traditional focus of their work before. So very, very beneficial for them. A further increasing focus is being put on climate action and sustainability governance, for instance. Also there, SAIs play a growing role in strengthening national responses to climate change. Furthermore, we've also witnessed a considerable impact of SDG audits. For example, the so-called preparedness audits of SAIs had really significant impacts on national policies and programs and on monitoring systems. Many audits have led national governments to adjust their institutional mechanisms to implement the SDGs. Finally, the report shows the importance of capacity development and cooperation. The rapid development of SAI expertise on the SDGs has also been driven by INTERSAI's sustained commitment to the 2030 agenda. Already since the SDGs entered into force or even before, INTERSAI has continuously been committed to support SAIs in their contribution to the SDG implementation. And this is also incorporated in the strategic plan of INTERSAI. Cooperative audits and capacity building initiatives have been key enablers in the development of SDG-related audit competences. So what does this mean from the perspective of the INTERSAI General Secretariat? I think that what we have already heard, these trends reflect very well that not only the progress towards the achievement of the SDGs has been accelerated by the audits of SAIs, but that also SAIs themselves have benefited a lot from the SDG-related audits, because these audits have broadened the scope of their audit work and also their perspectives. However, there are unfortunately worrying obstacles that are possibly hindering SAIs in their continued contribution to the SDG implementation. especially decreasing levels of and threats to SAI independence, as well as limited resources of SAIs, may negatively influence their contribution to sustainable development in the coming years. The latest IDI Global SDI Stocktaking report from 2023 shows that a decline in levels of independence has unfortunately been recurring for almost 10 years now, in spite of numerous efforts to support SDI independence. This decline can be explained by both legal limitations and practical challenges that SDIs are facing, like, for example, lower access to information, interferences in the selection of their audit programs, or obstacles to publishing their audits, just to mention a few ones. So this is a really concerning situation. But nevertheless, the World Public Sector Report shows that the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs have served as an important catalyst for more direct and structured engagement between INTOSAI, SEIs, and the UN. They have strengthened our collaboration across global, regional, and national processes related to the SDG implementation. And joint SDG events like the UN INTOSAI Symposia that are jointly organized by UNDESA and INTOSAI, with the last symposium in 2024 dedicated to the implementation of SDG 13 on climate action, for example, or the regular contribution of INTOSAI to the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, but also practical cooperation when it comes, for example, to joint audit or to the contribution of UNDESA to IDI's SDG audit model. All these examples witness the beneficial cooperation between UNDESA, INTOSAI, and its member SAIs. With unfortunately limited time remaining to achieve the 2030 Agenda, the continuation of this successful collaboration is more important than ever. Therefore, it will be crucial to support capacity building for SAIs and to promote their independence in order to enable them to continue their important contribution to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda. Leveraging the independent insights provided by SAIs can help to close implementation gaps and reinforce accountability in the years ahead. So now I would like to conclude by thanking you, UNDESA, again for our fruitful cooperation, and I look forward to continuing this collaboration also in the future in order to support the SDG implementation, follow-up, and review through our independent audits in the remaining years until 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Steiner. Excellent overview of all the important work that INTOSAI is doing and getting the SDGs really integrated and covered by SAIs, and your great collaboration with us, UNDESA. Thank you so much. We'll now turn to our next expert, Ms. Anjali Garg. Yes, it's now my pleasure to give you the floor. For many years, Ms. Garg was lead of the Open Budget Survey produced by the International Budget Partnership, which is the reference publication on global trends in the openness and transparency of national budgets. Prior to that, she worked at the U.S. Department of the Treasury and at the IMF. From this, you can guess that budget issues have no secrets for her. She was a reviewer of Chapter 3 of this report, which examines the work of SAIs on public financial management and public debt issues. Ms. Garg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. First, I'd like to offer my congratulations to David, Arantxa, and UNDESA colleagues on the publication of the World Public Sector Report 2025. The report's focus on the critical role that auditors play in the successful implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs is a welcome addition to the discussion on how we as a community can work together to ensure the achievement of the SDGs. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the report and to participate in today's webinar. Today, I'd like to focus my comments on Chapter 3, which, as Lisa mentioned, I had the privilege to review. My comments are informed by my previous work at the International Budget Partnership. As David mentioned, Chapter 3 highlights how greater accountability around the management of public funds is critical to building trust in public institutions, ensuring that governments plan and spend effectively to meet the SDGs, and creating space for all stakeholders to monitor the process. However, Chapter 3 also emphasizes that achieving the SDGs will require more than boosting quantity of finance available. and ensuring alignment between public expenditures and national development. Transforming financing into outcomes will depend on whether governments can effectively spend funds as promised and responsibly manage public debt. Strong budget credibility and responsible debt management will in turn depend on the quality and effectiveness of domestic accountability systems, which include transparency, participation, and formal oversight institutions. Against this backdrop, I'd like to offer 3 points today. First, within the accountability ecosystem, SAIs play a critical role in strengthening the implementation of the SDGs and ensuring that a country's budget is on track. SAI's independent verification of whether public accounts are reported accurately, whether funds are used in accordance with the law, and whether public spending is efficient and effective can be instrumental in governments delivering their development. SAI's insights on budget credibility and debt management in particular provide critical information for strengthening PFM and ensuring greater accountability. When it comes to strengthening budget credibility, SAIs are well positioned to identify budget deviations, examine why they occur, and highlight their consequences. With respect to debt management, SAIs can help identify governance gaps, fiscal risks, and deviations from approved fiscal frameworks, as well as help ensure that borrowing and debt servicing are conducted in a transparent and sustainable manner. This can be particularly helpful in the context of public debt, where borrowing decisions have intergenerational impacts, potentially weakening public scrutiny. Overall, the independent, evidence-based, publicly available audit reports that SAIs produce can highlight budget credibility, debt management challenges, identify their underlying causes, and describe how they relate to the achievement of the SDGs, creating both the political will and deeper understanding of the underlying challenges necessary to drive improvements. The second point I'd like to make is to draw attention to the report's contribution in highlighting the innovative approaches and tools already adopted by SAIs to enhance their auditing of budget credibility and debt management. This includes combining audit methodologies and greater use of performance audits. The report is replete with strong examples that demonstrate what is possible when SAIs have the resources, mandate, capacity, and independence to meaningfully audit issues related to budget credibility and debt management. For example, the report documents how audits focused on budget execution identified deficiencies related to inaccurate cost estimates, weaknesses in specific PFM processes, such as procurement, unauthorized reallocations, weak forecasting models, and shortcomings in fiscal disclosure and transparency. In one example, the SAI in Portugal reported how an effort to control overall expenditures in education and health resulted in under-budgeting, which in turn contributed to a high volume of reallocations, delays of payments, and accumulation of arrears. In the context of debt management, the chapter highlights audits that verified the accuracy and completeness of debt reports, evaluated the adherence to borrowing limits and legal frameworks, as well as examined debt sustainability and the implementation of debt strategies. For example, a 2018 audit from Sri Lanka exposed the significant amounts of public debt were omitted from financial statements, resulting in incomplete disclosure and undermining debt transparency in the country. The third and final point I would like to make is that the impact of audit findings depends heavily on what is done with recommendations. Governments often fail to act on findings as they are simply not under sufficient pressure to implement audit recommendations. To ensure recommendations translate into policy or institutional change, executives must respond to audit recommendations in an adequate and timely manner. Strengthening connections between actors and establishing systematic processes for monitoring and following up on recommendations is essential to meaningful, lasting impact. For example, Dynamic interaction between legislatures and SAIs can improve accountability and drive executives to implement audit recommendations. Legislatures should, for example, discuss audit findings and publicly track actions by the executive to address audit recommendations. Civil society, as the report points out, can also amplify audit and help exert pressure on governments to address audit recommendations. As the report emphasizes, SAI should view civil society as a key partner in ensuring that audit findings generate. I'll stop there, but thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Garg. We'll now turn to our next expert. Our third discussant today is Ms. Archana Shirsat from the UNDESA Development Initiative, or IDI. IDI is the capacity building arm of UNDESA. As such, it has spearheaded major advances in SDG auditing since 2016, including through the development of audit guidance and through supporting global training and audits on specific SDG areas. IDI also produces global surveys of SAIs every 3 years, which document trends in their work, strategic priorities, and capacities. Ms. Shirsat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you. I can see that we have people from up. Congratulations. Let me join everyone in congratulating DESA on the we are I also want to take this opportunity to join Silke, especially in thanking DESA for highlighting the and making visible the contribution of Supreme Audit institutions. We have been a part of this process right from the beginning of the 2030 agenda. When SAIs were discussing how to hello?
Hi, we hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Um, uh, we started way back, and it was a time when we were still SAIs were still requiring a seat at the table, with SAIs not even mentioned. And today here we are with an entire report dedicated. So it's been a long journey, and we're truly thankful to the partnership with DESA. I was asked to speak a bit about the key innovations in auditing related to the work that we have done with SDGs. And I think Silke has mentioned it in IDI. We have worked together with the entire community on an IDI's SDGs audit model. SDGs in the 2030 agenda helped us to think about performance audit and reflect on it in a very different way. And we realized that the performance audit methodology and standards of INTOSAI provided sufficient criteria for undertaking SDG audits. However, we needed to tweak the methodology. And it was a tweak which required us to bring together a results and a systems-oriented approach to focus on whole of government in the design of the audits and in conducting the audits, looking across the ecosystem, looking at policy coherence, looking at multi-stakeholder engagement, not only in terms of as an audit subject matter, but also in engaging with different stakeholders and especially non-government actors. And we saw SAIs doing this a lot. Reflections on Leave No One Behind is definitely mentioned. And you will see all these in the IDI's SDGs audit model, which is updated, which is available on our website, as well as 2 audit frameworks on policy coherence, as well as Leave No One Behind. In terms of the audit practices, we saw SAIs taking up strategic audit planning across their audits and do multi-sectoral audit work and put together multi-sectoral teams for their audit work. And we saw SDGs being seen more and more in the audit plans as well as the strategic plans that SAIs develop. I think in terms of impact, we started with preparedness audits, and I still remember that SAIs, there are many countries in which the government started looking at SDGs because the SAIs started asking these questions. So they nudged governments into action on SDGs, provided information in the public space, and of course, provided evidence based insights and recommendations. We continued with the audits of SDG implementation. Their IDI focused on 3 key areas: sustainable public procurement, public health services resilience, and elimination of intimate partner violence against women. And there again, we saw that there was independent external oversight that was provided besides evidence based insights and recommendations. But more importantly, we also saw this as an opportunity to bring together global work that was being done with new models. Like, for example, WHO was working with health services resilience, which went beyond health security. And that model, again developed by a UN agency, came into a country level perspective through the work done by supreme audit institutions. So we could really see how this was coming together. Looking internally, I think these audits have tremendously helped SAIs in strengthening their performance audit competencies. But more importantly, as has been mentioned, it has raised the profile of the work done by SAIs and created awareness that SAIs don't just count numbers or provide assurance on financial statements, but have a much, much larger role and a mandate to play. Going forward, the question always comes up is, should we stop working with sustainable development after 2030 as the agenda comes to a close? Is there value in continuing to strengthening individual competencies? And for us, the answer is a resounding yes. Even though the 2030 agenda is time bound, effective, accountable, and inclusive public institutions that deliver value will continue to be in fashion. And we believe that it's important that to remain relevant, to enhance trust and improve lives. And that's also something that Intosai's P12 on the value and benefits of SAI speaks to. So from IDI, we will definitely be engaged. We stand ready to support the community, and I'm happy to inform. And I think many of our participants online may also uh, be participating in this. We currently have a SAI SDG Auditors Initiative. We have 186 SAI auditors from 41 Supreme Audit institutions participating in this. And in this, I'm particularly pleased that we have 14 SAIs from small island developing states. And together with our regional partners, we have been able to build fit for purpose and doable audit models to support SAIs, especially in small island developing states, where capacity constraints are a big, big issue. So we plan to continue working with professional education and reflections, provide this platform to Supreme Audit institutions, both for the auditors as well as SAIs. And looking at the areas that the report covers, I think the future will require us not only to look at audit methodology, but to look at technology and the use of technology and AI in audits, which is again something we are supporting. But we're also looking at dimensions that are coming up, like sustainability reporting in the public sector, public debt accountability, which includes transparency, sustainability, as well as debt management, the fight against corruption, which is very important, and domestic resource mobilization. And these are many of the issues which have also been highlighted by the Financing for Development, uh, you know, event that took place. So we believe that continued work in these areas is very important, and we are delighted to work together with the community to continue to support SAIs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shirsat. We are ahead of schedule by a few minutes, so we now have the time for some questions from the audience. We have a few questions in the chat. If anybody wants to try to get one in, now is the time. And so, yes, this concludes our interventions by panelists, and I'm going to bring in a few questions. I'll hand it over to whichever of you feels inclined to respond. The first question we have from Kea Hillary. I'm not sure where Kea is joining from, but a great question. What's the single most actionable insight from this year's report that can be implemented by local community leaders? So I'll open it to David or any of the panelists who want to respond to that. I think excellent question. The single most actionable insight from this year's report that can be implemented by local community leaders. What do you think?
Can I go?
Yes, please, David.
I mean, of course, I won't answer the question because it's too difficult. And I'm not a local community leader, so I can't really answer that question. But I would say that, to me, the question suggests the following answer, which is, let's say there is a national social program that has application. I mean, that's, has impact in your local community or city or etc. You want to look at the website of your supreme audit institution to see whether they have examined this program. Because when they do things like that, SAIs go to the very nitty-gritty level. They will go down to the local level to see how funds are executed, how, for example, benefits are received or not received by those who should receive them, etc. And they will document all this. So, they accessing this and reading these audit reports will give you a view of what the SAI thinks the main problems are, and that might be very helpful to engage in dialogue, for example, with the national level, if a program is not working well, for example. So that would be my first. So using the audits as source of information that, I mean, as many panelists have said, nobody else would really have. And then I think that audit reports can also be used at the local level as an inspiration for example, commissioning evaluations, be it from your own departments, from your own internal audits, or sometimes there are different layers, different levels of audit institutions in a country. You can have one at the federal level for federal countries, then one at the state level, and maybe even some at the lower level. So use what SAIs are doing, especially on the SDGs, as inspiration for the kind of work that you want to do yourself in your own context, in your community. Thank you.
Great. Any other panelists want to comment on Kea, who is from Kenya? Kea from Kenya, a question regarding what local community leaders can do, the most actionable finding. Anybody have another recommendation? Okay, we can move to our next, or Anjali?
Thanks, Lisa. I was just going to make a small follow-on point, which is just to reinforce something that I mentioned in my comments and relates to Kea's question, which is the impact of audit reports really depends on what's done with them. and sustainable, meaningful impact depends on auditors forming partnerships, not just with legislatures and other institutional bodies of government, but with local communities, civil society, the media, and other partners. And so in response to Kaya's question, I think, after, as David suggested, going to the auditor's website, looking at whether programs of interest have been audited, what the findings and recommendations are, to really find opportunities to partner with SAIs and amplify those findings so that the government takes note.
Excellent point. Yeah. So I think, yeah, and what another point that was mentioned was just, if depending if these community leaders are, what their field or their expertise, but they can reach out to political leaders and ask how they are implementing the recommendations of the SAIs. So I think that would be an excellent follow-up action for community leaders. Great. Another question from the audience. The report underscores the importance of accountability and oversight. How do Supreme Audit institutions interact with other institutions and stakeholders to enhance trust, transparency, and performance in the public sector? Anybody want to take that up? David?
I think this is a question for SAIs.
Yes, okay. Maybe Archana, yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I believe that, SAI audit impact or even SAI audits are a shared responsibility. SAIs cannot do anything on their own. They work as a part of a larger accountability ecosystem. And in that context, I think, together with IBP, IDI had also worked on a publication called All Hands on the Deck, where we spoke about this accountability ecosystem. But at the same time, SAIs need to have a very good balance between the independence of the Supreme Audit Institution and its engagement with stakeholders. And this is something that SAIs fiercely do guard. What we have seen SAIs increasingly do, and as I mentioned also in the context of SDG audits, is to reach out and not just have this, to form kind of this coalitions or institutional arrangements with various actors in the larger ecosystem. And these is not just actors like we have parliaments, of course, most important audited entities whom they audit and who will actually implement the recommendations, but also then civil society organizations which can amplify the reports, media, professional bodies, academia. So there is and citizens at large, and you will see across it's a varied kind of a landscape, but you will see that across the board SAIs do engage, and they engage at different stages in the audit process also. So it's not something that they do only at the follow-up stage after the audit is done. But a lot of their audit work and what they take up for audit is influenced by, what is the feedback that they are getting? What are the expectations of the stakeholders? So I think this is a very rich landscape, and it can only be strengthened further by engaging. And I would actually encourage different stakeholders to reach out and engage with the Supreme Audit institutions in their countries and to find opportunities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And Silke, I see you have your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Well, Ashana already covered a lot what I wanted to say as well. So we are really numerous stakeholders we have, and I think among the most important ones are our parliaments, because these are the ones that are dealing with our reports and our recommendations. Then the media, of course, so our reports have to be spread, they have to be made known in the public. The citizens as such as well. For example, we are in Austria, just a national example, we are incorporating the citizens also in our audit planning process. So ask them to send us some suggestions what we could audit. Then, of course, civil society, that was a very new experience for us in the SDG audits, that we really interacted also with civil society in these fields. And of course, we have our international partners, we have other SAIs, we cooperate, we support each other. And then, of course, international organizations like the UN, but also other international partners. So there's really a broad network of stakeholders with whom we interact.
Excellent. Great. Another question we have, in an era of digital government and increasingly complex public spending, how does the report see the role of SAIs evolving beyond traditional compliance audits? Anyone want to take it? Anjali, is this for you? Any thoughts on that? Archana, yes, please.
The world is really evolving very fast. And if you look at the deliberations of the latest INCOSAI, which was the Congress of INTOSAI, we had an entire thematic area around, auditing artificial intelligence and auditing with the use of artificial intelligence. So what I would say is that the SAI community is really kind of making a lot of efforts to keep abreast with the fast changing landscape of technology and AI. It is quite daunting, I must admit. But what we see in the community is that there is a huge uptake and an interest in developing auditor competencies to use technology and AI in audits. Many SAIs, if you look across the board, are publishing reports on this. And SAIs actually don't do just compliance audits. SAIs have always done financial audits, performance audits, and compliance audits as well. And what we see in the community, and there are a number of examples as well as publications, across the board, you will see that SAIs have engaged with both information technology and now more and more with AI as well. So we see that this is informing both the way SAIs are doing audits. Like if you go to an SAI like Costa Rica, you will see that they have innovative approaches to do continuous auditing. They're taking a very different approach to the way they audit, the way they use data analytics, and what they have out there in public space as well. And again, as I said, that they are also auditing this as subject matter. So you would find audit reports on algorithms which are used by governments as well. So there is a large body of work that has been done in this area, and we can also provide links, but I would really encourage to look at this body of work that's being done, especially if you look at the working groups of INTOSAI and their websites or the SAI websites also, you would find this. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you for those resources to check out. And Silke?
Well, I just wanted to add to what Ashana already said, that especially the SDG audits have helped SAIs a lot to maybe go away from traditional just compliance audit or financial audits and move to performance audits. So this was new, as Ashana said. Many SAIs or most SAIs cover all fields of audits, but for some of them, performance audits were rather new. And the SDG audits helped them a lot to apply this whole of government approach to broaden the scope of their audits. So this was really beneficial for SAIs.
Excellent. Great. We're running close to the end here, but we do have a couple questions left from the chat. So I'll put the last two questions out there and give you kind of a closing 30 seconds to respond if you wish. One question from Rolf Alter from SIPA. How do SAIs keep up with the acceleration of policy agendas? And I think that Archana, you did touch on this in your intervention. Another question from Sebastian Gill. Can you briefly describe how SAIs can audit policy coherence and the 2030 agenda principle of leave no one behind? I think, Silke, you touched on that. But I'll leave it open if you have any kind of comment for either of those questions, or any kind of final closing quick few words? Silke, or? No, I just saw, oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I think Jan already covered the question with accelerating policies. As a new, AI is a huge topic at the moment, so we really try to be open to new trends, to catch up with them. So we have the INCOSAIs where we're discussing trends. We have our working groups. AI is the topic at the moment, I would say, and big data, etc. And how we audit policy coherence, not so easy to explain in 30 seconds, I'm afraid.
No
But
pressure.
I mean, I myself took part in such an audit, and it was a great experience. So we really were interviewing a lot of ministries, having a look at what they are doing, comparing the different policies, and yeah, looking for strategies for overall concepts, etc. So just a few examples. And finally, I just wanted to thank everybody, of course, DESA for the organization, and everybody for this really, I think, very inspiring discussion today.
Thank you. I think that's a good point to end on, and we're perfectly on time. So thank you all for participating today. Please do refer to the full report. We've shared the link in the chat. Has a lot more detail than you've heard today, of course, and some of the answers to questions we didn't get to are there. So please check them out. We also have a number of policy briefs that have been derived from this report as well. I shared the link in the chat to our policy brief website. We have policy briefs. There's 4 related to this report there, all in English, and we're beginning to translate them into French and Spanish, so some translations also available. This has been a really wonderful, rich, and informative session. I want to thank the panelists for taking the time and for their insightful contributions. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll conclude the launch of the World Public Sector Report 2025. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.